Tonight, if you think back far enough, you'll hit a wall. Not a fuzzy memory, not a blurry one, a wall. Somewhere around age 3, your life just starts. Everything before that, walk right up to the edge of it, and there's nothing. No hallway, no door, just white space where roughly 1,000 days of your life used to be. And here's the part that should bother you more than it does. You weren't unconscious for those 1,000 days. You weren't unaware. You were laughing. You were scared of things. You were learning your own name. You were forming preferences, feeling pain, recognizing faces. By every measure that matters, you were already a person.
That person is gone. Not dead, just unreachable. So where did they go? For a long time, the answer people gave was simple. Babies can't remember because babies can't think. Not really, not in any way that counts. Freud was one of the first to put a name on this gap. He called it infantile amnesia, and his explanation was that early memories were repressed, pushed down because they were too sexually charged, too disturbing for a young, undeveloped mind to consciously hold. It's a strange theory. It sounded authoritative for decades, and it's wrong.
The real answer didn't show up until the 1980s and 90s in a lab run by a psychologist named Carolyn Rovee-Collier. She ran a deceptively simple experiment on infants as young as 2 or 3 months old, babies who supposedly weren't capable of remembering anything at all. She'd tie a ribbon from a baby's ankle to a mobile hanging above the crib. Kick your leg, the mobile moves. Babies figure this out fast. Within minutes, they're kicking on purpose, delighted, making the mobile dance across the ceiling. Then she'd take the mobile away. Wait. Days later, sometimes weeks later, she'd bring it back. No ribbon connected this time, and just watch what happened. The babies kicked immediately, before anything was even reconnected. Their legs remembered the trick before their brains had a reason to. They remembered. Full stop.
That result broke the old theory instantly. These infants weren't blank slates waiting to become people. They were already forming real memories, holding on to them for weeks at a time, and retrieving them the moment the right cue reappeared. So, if babies can remember, why can't you remember being one? Here's the part nobody talks about. The memories didn't disappear because they were never formed. They disappeared because of what your brain was doing at the exact same time it was forming them. Around the age those missing years end, 2, 3, 4 years old, your hippocampus is going through an explosive construction project. This is the brain structure responsible for taking short bursts of experience and filing them into long-term, retrievable memory. And in early childhood, it is nowhere near finished being built.
New neurons are being generated inside it at a staggering rate, a process called neurogenesis. Every new neuron that gets added has to physically wire itself into the existing network, and in doing so, it can overwrite, reroute, or scramble the exact connections that were holding older memories in place. In 2014, a researcher named Paul Frankland, working with Sheena Josselyn at the University of Toronto, ran an experiment on mice that made this almost impossible to argue with. They took infant mice and gave them a memory, a specific fear association tied to a location. Then they artificially sped up neurogenesis in the hippocampus of one group and slowed it down in another. The faster new neurons were added, the faster the memory vanished. The mice forgot the fear association almost completely. When neurogenesis was slowed down instead, the memory stuck around far longer than it should have for an infant brain.
The conclusion was almost uncomfortable in how simple it was. The same biological process responsible for building your capacity to remember anything at all for the rest of your life is also the exact process erasing your earliest memories as it goes. You didn't lose your first 3 years because your brain failed. You lost them because your brain was too busy constructing the machine that would remember everything else you'd ever experience afterward. But
And this is the twist under the twist. A 2021 study out of the Ryan Lab at Trinity College Dublin, building on that same Toronto research, found something that should genuinely unsettle you. They tagged the original memory-holding brain cells in infant mice using light-activated proteins, essentially planting a switch inside the exact neurons that stored a specific memory. Then months later, long after the memory seemed completely gone by every normal test, unretrievable, behaviorally erased, they shined a light directly on those tagged cells.
The memory came back, instantly, fully formed. The mice responded exactly as if the fear association had never faded at all. It wasn't deleted. It was locked. The storage was still fully intact the entire time. What had actually been lost was never the memory itself, only the retrieval pathway, the key. The route that lets a mature brain reach back in and pull the information out on demand. Which means somewhere in your skull, right now, there may be a fully intact memory of your first birthday. Your mother's voice before you knew what a mother was. The exact texture of the blanket you were wrapped in as an infant. The sound of a specific door in a house you may not even remember living in. Not gone. Filed. Behind a door with no handle. This is why researchers who study trauma and early attachment take those forgotten years so seriously, even though no one involved can consciously recall a single moment of them. You can't remember being neglected or held or spoken to gently or ignored during that window. But the neural architecture built during those years doesn't need your permission to keep running. It shows up later as the way you flinch, the way you trust or don't, the way you self-soothe or spiral, decades after the specific memories that built those patterns became unreachable.
An entire era of who you are was assembled before your first accessible memory even existed, and it's still quietly steering things. You've spent your whole life assuming those first 3 years were simply gone. A blank canvas your real life got painted onto once the real you showed up. They weren't blank. They were foundational. You just don't have the key. So tonight, when you hit that wall in your memory, the one where your life seems to begin, remember that it isn't actually the beginning. It's just the first door you can still open. Everything before it is still there, sealed, intact, and waiting, quietly running the rest of your life from somewhere you were never given access to see.